People of God, today is Wilderness Sunday in our season of creation. It is also 4th of July weekend, so there are some materials in your worship resources to help you appreciate the natural places that we have protected as national parks in this country. Thank you to Michelle for reading our scripture readings for us in that beautiful natural setting. Now, we are familiar with the stories of Jesus going into the wilderness immediately after his baptism. There, Satan tempted him, testing his identity and what Jesus would use that identity to do for himself. We can also probably recall that the Hebrew people wandered for 40 years in the wilderness after God delivered them from slavery in Egypt. But if you look at the map of that part of the world, it surely didn't take them 40 years to traverse the distance from where they started to where they ended up. But the time spent in the wilderness was what God used to transform them into God's very own people. Being in the wilderness is clarifying for us on its own. Just the experience of not being in our controlled environments is holy, which means set apart. There is finally enough space when we are in the middle of nowhere for us to let God be God and let ourselves be the beloved creatures of that God. Yet while we may yearn for clarity or a clearer sense of connection with God, we do not really want it to come about through a humbling, out of our control experience, wandering in the wilderness. Or perhaps I'll just speak for me. I don't appreciate not knowing what's going on, not being able to plan for the future, or repeatedly commenting, we didn't learn about how to do that in seminary. Now, we do not need to claim that God is testing us by experiences that make us feel like we're in wilderness territory, such as a pandemic, or maybe even facing racial injustice with a clarity we never before experienced. These conditions are not a sign that a manipulative God is meddling to get us to learn something, but the experience itself of not being in control, not being able to predict the future. That experience is clarifying for people of faith. The wilderness asks questions of us. Questions like, who am I when I cannot control the world around me? It is a necessary question for the church in the 21st century and for all faithful followers of Jesus. It was even before this unprecedented time. How do we think about ourselves, individually or collectively? How do we regulate our feelings and our behaviors and interact with others if it is not about serving ourselves or keeping going the systems that gives our lives structure or meaning, such as regular Sunday church? Be assured, people of God, being in the wilderness raised similar questions for Jesus. Who am I when none of those things are here to define me or dictate my actions? The wilderness also raises the question, when all else is stripped away, what remains? Well, in Jesus' case, in the wilderness, the wild beasts kept him company, and the angels, the messengers of God, waited on him. When all the habits and stuff that we surround ourselves with are gone, what comes into focus as really important to recognize, to understand, and to respect? The environment, creation, with which we must live in harmony if we are to survive, comes into very clear focus. Romans 8 says, "Creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God." Indeed, everything and everyone is waiting for us to drop the things we spend our time and attention and resources on in order to do what God created us to do, according to our Genesis creation stories, to care for and protect all of God's beloved creatures and created world. The whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now. And so are our siblings from all of humankind groaning because we're in the middle of the pain of labor without the relief of seeing the baby safely delivered. Yet there is a promise that through us, God will tend and protect and nurture the whole world. Everything is waiting for us to deliver on that promise. Yet we cannot skip to the healing and recovery step without the time in the wilderness. We must face the pain and the effort in order to clarify the crucial things that we need to focus on, in order to push through to hopeful joy. The Spirit will intercede for us, the scripture promises, even when we are too deeply in labor to do anything more than sigh or grunt. The action step this week is to spend time really reflecting on what this wilderness will mean for you on the other side of it. How will you be changed by this out of control time? What does it mean for you? And what does it mean for your congregation and your world? How will you let being in the wilderness transform your priorities? Now, we hope in a God who has gone before us in Jesus and prepares a place for us within the new creation. There will be another side, but we do need to spend time here to get there changed by the journey. Thanks be to God for being with us in this wilderness.